school will be beautiful, but to accomplish this, our environment needs to go beyond just the physical structure, and it needs to reflect what we seek to give, which is to know the good, the true, and the beautiful. And it must be a place of order, but also harmony. It needs to have freedom, but discipline. It needs to inspire wonder and awe and imagination in the child with that thread of joy running through. We will be very intentional about creating this environment inside and outside the building. So when you visit the school, we want you to be uplifted by beautiful art. We want you to be inspired by the natural elements. And we want you to feel a sense when you go into your child's classroom that that environment has been carefully prepared for them in a way that is fitting for that age of the child and for their development. Outside, we love a good garden, and we're really knowing that children, one of our deepest desires for the school is that our learning environment outside is also enriching to the child. So that includes a learning gazebo, gardens, hopefully fruit trees. We got to get going on those. If we're going to have any fruit in the near future. It would be kickball and foursquare and blacktop. It doesn't have to look like Disneyland. It has to be good for the child's imagination, and it has to give them room to run and play, but also to learn. So inside and outside. We have room for a wonderful Catholic library, and something we're very excited about. We've already acquired a library, so Sheila and I are excited to set that up. The most important preparation, though, that we make is hiring teachers. That is the number one thing that we do as an administrative staff, is find the people that are inspiring and that will be inspiring to your children. We want them, as the saying goes, they cannot teach what they do not have, and we cannot model what we do not authentically live. So for us, that is a beautiful Catholic young person, male or female, that person that lives the faith and shares it with your children. How can your child experience the love of God if they're not surrounded by loving adults? And so that's a priority for us. We want them also to be trained in classical methodologies and to have a vision for what liberal arts looks like in the primary classroom. So at this time, I was saying that they're second only, your children are second only to, our teachers are second only to our greatest treasure, which is your children. I'm going to introduce you to, you already know Sheila Gramling. Father introduced her as the Director of Human and Evangelical Formation. Sheila is an educated in liberal arts through the University of Dallas. She is more of a humanities person. I am probably more of a math and science person, which I say is why we make a great team. And she is going to kind of talk a little bit more about our mission as an authentically Catholic school.
So Jesus present in the Eucharist is our source and our summit. He's our joy in our faith, in our families, and of course in our school. As we began that great work of the renovation of the school, the first priority was to find the right place for Jesus. And I can tell you, our Eucharistic chapel is prominent, and it will be beautiful. But we also want to be an environment where everyone that walks in the building knows that Jesus holds the central place in our hearts and in the hearts of all of our children. Teachers in every subject have two goals: that our students know our subject matter, but also that they love our subject. And theology is unique, even among the academic subjects, because we do want them to know the beauty and truth of our faith. We want them to love the beauty and truth of our faith, but we also want them to know and love a person. And really, I have been doing this a long time. Theology is kind of my primary subject. This really requires two distinct environments for the young child. One that is aimed at catechism and one that is aimed at catechesis. So I describe catechism is where we ask questions that have objectively good, true, and beautiful answers. Who is God? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But in catechesis, we ask, who is God the Father? Who is God the Son? Who is God the Holy Spirit? To give a human example, who is my grandmother? She is my mother's mother. Objective, important answer. But who is my grandmother is unique to me. And it encompasses the smell of cookies and the feel of her fingers on my head as I fall asleep, and the sound of her voice telling me stories about Spotty the dog. Our theology class in the classroom will be objective, it will be rigorous, it will teach the child the truth and beauty of the faith. But in the atrium of the Good Shepherd, the beautiful time and environment to allow them to grow in their own personal and beautiful relationship with God.
One of my biggest concerns in Catholic Ed, I've been doing this for about 32 years, is that we try to take this secular curriculum and make it more Catholic by layering on what I think is a term we call Catholicity. And we just layer that on top. And one of the, I use a silly example from math, because this was actually in a math manual that I saw in the curriculum guide, and it said that to teach children to count to 12, you can count the apostles, and that will make it more Catholic. And I laugh at that example because, math is Catholic because it orders the universe. And that is what we want, and we want them to be able to order the universe and to apply math to science and to integrate it. And so to make it authentic, which children will smell, they know when things are authentic, we don't necessarily want to layer it, we want to build it from the foundation. And that requires more of us. This includes, it includes the liturgical part of a school. It includes Mass twice a week. It includes adoration and benediction and celebration of all the great feasts. But it also involves culture, daily culture, around what I would call the liturgical calendar. We like to build our school calendars around the secular calendar, and I love a school that builds it around the liturgical calendar so that the traditional Catholic devotions, saints' feast days, every single day we're celebrating something beautiful and true about our faith, and you do that as a foundation.
So the history of classical education finds its roots in ancient Greece. And for the ancient Greeks, the perfection of man was by attaining wisdom and virtue. And in Plato's Republic, the greatest of all Greek teachers, Socrates, explains where man begins and where we want him to end through the image of a cave. And it begins with the man chained to the wall of the cave, where his entire perception of reality are shadows dancing on the wall in front of him. A guardian is sent into the cave to unchain him and turn him around, where he sees that his entire reality has been created by puppets being moved in front of a fire. He is led up and out of the cave, sometimes kicking and screaming, because we all know it can be sometimes very difficult to realize that my truth is not actually the truth. He's led out into the world, illuminated by the night sky, where he can now see shadows of what is real. Over time, his eyes become adjusted to the sun, and he can look at what is truly real in the world. Eventually, his eyes become so adjusted, he can turn and gaze at the sun, the source of all that is true in the world. He also laid out for us how we can educate man from being a slave chained to a wall to true freedom. He understood that we cannot teach man what to think or what to choose, but how to think and how to choose. And this is accomplished in anything through three distinct arts. The art of grammar, is the foundational knowledge, those things that can be memorized. And in so doing, builds our capacity for memory. We move to the logic stage, which allows us to use that foundational knowledge in more theoretical and abstract ways, which develops our capacity for imagination. We finally move to rhetoric, which is where we learn to argue eloquently, logically, and articulately that which we know to be true. All of this was aimed at philosophy, which allowed man to contemplate the source of good. He did this through specific subjects, math and science. In the grammar stage, arithmetic. In the logic stage, he learned geometry and astronomy. And then in philosophy, we learn to contemplate that truth as well as to defend it and argue it. In the Middle Ages, when the West emerged out of the Dark Ages, the church found herself in the position of being the institution to provide structure to society. And it is here where we see those math and sciences expand to include what we call the liberal arts. She was in charge of politics and education of the child. And we have added politics and philosophy, literature, and language. But through Revelation, the church understood that man's greatest perfection is not a life of purely human wisdom and virtue. We have access to theological virtue. And philosophy is not the end goal, but through philosophy, theology, because we cannot just contemplate the source, we are called to be in relationship with him. So what does this mean for a modern Catholic, classical, liberal arts elementary school? How are we different? We are different because our end is different. Our goal is different. And to explain why I believe that is so incredibly important, I'm going to use a sports analogy, which anyone who knows me knows I have one for everything. Even though I'm not a super big sports fan, I pick my teams by the color of their jerseys. So, why do we put our children in sports education? We put our children in sports in order to help them reach their fullest athletic potential. And we know that we can do this in any sport. All athletes have common qualities. They are fast, strong, they have endurance. They also share invisible qualities, grit and resilience, a spirit of competition and fair play. They have an enormous ability to judge their own abilities, but also to see where they want to improve. We can move them in any sport, and the more the better, through that stage of grammar, where we teach them the basics. And we practice it over and over again until it becomes part of their muscle memory. Then we introduce them to the knowledge of the game, right? To see the whole field or the court, to be able to react in a variety of situations, even ones we've never seen before. And we'll call it the rhetoric stage of sport, where when we see it, we use words like perfection, brilliance, and beauty. In my lifetime, I have seen two errors in sport, where we have moved something secondary to the primary position. On one side, it's money, college scholarship, or the golden goose of the professional career. On the other side, it's to have fun and to build self-esteem. If our goal is to help children reach their fullest athletic potential, we can accomplish both. But when we move something secondary to primary, it affects everything we do down the line. If the goal is money, what becomes most important is winning. And if winning is most important, it affects how we coach. Sometimes that means we bench the kids who are late bloomers, or we allow the good kids to play who are sorely lacking in some of those invisible qualities. We get specialized earlier and earlier down the line to where we as parents feel if our children aren't in club soccer by 3rd grade, they're never going to reach their fullest potential. On the other side, if the goal is self-esteem and having fun, we often have programs that aren't rooted in the basics, that aren't rigorous. And in the end, we don't accomplish our goal on either side. Because on this side, for that rare child that has what it takes to make it at the professional level, we have stolen from them the opportunity to choose from a wide variety what they love most. And on this side, we don't end up having fun because nobody really has fun in a sport they're no good at. And self-esteem does not come from participation, but from accomplishing personal goals. I've seen this same error in education. On one side, the goal is money, the college scholarship, or the job at the end. On the other side, the goal is self-esteem and self-realization. Both of these can be accomplished if we are trying to make them reach their fullest human potential. But when we move something secondary to what is primary, it affects everything we do down the line. If money is the goal, what becomes most important is the standardized test. That affects how we teach, and it creates an environment filled with anxiety and often rampant cheating. We get specialized earlier and earlier down the line, not based on the needs of the child, but on the needs of the economy. On the other side, if the goal is self-esteem and self-realization, we have most important the child's feelings. We have a lack of rigor, we have a lack of order, and we have a lack of objectivity. Our goal is to help your child reach his fullest human potential so that he can be the adult that doesn't just know how to make money, but has the wisdom to know how to use it when he has it. On the other side, we will have a child that doesn't just say, I can be all that I can be. They aim higher and say, I can be all that God can make me. We are here to plant and nurture the seeds that will grow into those kind of human beings.
So I'm quickly going to answer the question, why elementary school? Some come to us with the idea that maybe high school is more important, but Sheila and I both believe that the opposite is true. The founders of the CGS program, Sophia Cavalletti and Gianna Gobi, they believe truly in the religious potential of the child, and that child, at the earliest age, the children hear the voice of God. And it is with that, they form this relationship with God at that early age. They hear his voice. That's why elementary school matters so much, because we want to immerse the child in a way that allows for this voice to be heard. And we do it while they're impressionable, we do it in this safe and nurturing environment that honors that relationship that they're forming with God. The world is really loud, and we know that it's opposed to what we know to be true, and it seems to be getting a little louder every day. We want to be a place where your children can love what is beautiful, we can nurture and develop the will to do the good, and we can see true beauty everywhere, which is my way of introducing the next topic, which is the transcendentals.
So in any discussion of classical education, you're going to hear about the transcendentals, what is good, what is true, what is beautiful. And that is kind of what anything that is good and true and beautiful that we learn, that we contemplate, is going to lead us to wisdom and virtue. So that defines what we study, our curriculum, right? That defines how we teach, our methodology. But most importantly, it tells us what we're aiming for, which is relationship with He who is the source of all that is good, true, and beautiful. literacy.
Sorry, there we go. Yep, literacy. I missed a slide there.
All right. So I think we need the next one. The next slide.
Do we? Okay.
Yeah, because it has
There we
all
go.
the.
Mhm.
So in elementary school, the primary academic goal is literacy. It is essential for all further academic learning and much joy in life. Our brains are hardwired as human beings to learn oral language, but not to learn to read. That we have to be taught. And brain research has proven that it is actually the process of sounding out individual letters to form words is what actually rewires our brain and makes reading possible. I still don't think they understand exactly what's all going on that allows us to read, but that rewiring happens. I thought the importance of phonics in literacy had been decided 25 years ago, but through the pandemic and parents having access to their children's classrooms and some investigative reporting, we now know that 1 in 4 schools in the United States was not teaching phonics. It's utterly shocking to me. I was trained in a lot of these methodologies in the 90s for older children, for middle school children, and to find out that it was all that beauty was based on a rotten foundation, it really is shocking. And while I do think we are going to see a swing back to the importance of phonics in every single school, I wonder what will get thrown out in order to do that, number one. I also know that we always overemphasize, and we have to remember that decoding is not reading. It is absolutely essential, but reading is finding meaning in words. And so vocabulary is an enormously important part of literacy. And we will help our children to constantly be building and expanding their vocabulary. Of course, through memory work, but also by exposing them to engaging stories with rich and beautiful language at every level of K through 8. Reading aloud to the child will be part of our literacy. As a child emerges to what we call the emergent reader, where they can sound out the words and they're beginning to read, we begin to include spelling and grammar as essential parts of literacy. Spelling and grammar help with reading comprehension, and they allow for readable writing. Handwriting is actually incredibly important, especially cursive. Builds neural connections in the brain. It helps with spelling, it helps with syntax. And although reading comprehension is the ultimate goal, for academic success, we also have to make sure our children are constantly challenged in their speed of reading and their stamina of reading. That's where we can sit for longer and longer periods of time with the text, and also with fluency, meaning what they are reading is actually what is written on the page. This requires a lot of books, a wide variety of books on level for the child to read independently every step of the way. But it also requires a balance between what we require and what they can choose for themselves. In the early years, it's also really important for children to have guided reading with their teacher, because it's not just enough to everybody read the text together or to send them off on their own to read. We need to teach into the text, but more importantly, we need a means to assess their reading comprehension that isn't a multiple choice test at the end of everything that they read.
I'm going to go a little further. The red, this tends to go towards the logic and rhetoric stage, because the end goal is that your children are amazing communicators through the written word, through the oral word, and through reading. So so literacy is very important. I'm just going to touch a little bit upon dyslexia. As Sheila and I have been doing some research into literacy, it is the statistics are really alarming when it comes to our reading levels in the United States. 21% of adults in the United States read below a 5th grade level, and it's 1/3 of Kansas students are below grade level, and many of them are well below grade level. So part of this is because of what Sheila talked about with this balanced literacy approach and kind of throwing phonics out. But I did want to address dyslexia because it's driving our phonics program. Dyslexia is a genetically identifiable brain imaging that we've actually kind of seen dyslexia in the brain, how it looks different than a typical reader. And 15 to 20% of the population will be identified as dyslexia. And it actually accounts for 80 to 90% of all learning disabilities. So it's a really large problem in education today. So we just want to touch on our phonics program. We're going to use a phonics program that is rooted in what's called Orton-Gillingham approach. It is not Orton-Gillingham because that tends to be an intervention for those who have dyslexia. But this phonics approach is great for typical children. It's great for those that will eventually emerge, that we know much later when we find out in 3rd and 4th grade that this child might be dyslexic. So I just want to give you some confidence that the reading program is solid and that we've really methodically thought through literacy as a significant part of our education. I'm going to talk a little bit about math. That tends to be my wheelhouse. The math program, you could choose, there's no perfect math curriculum, and I tend to like Singapore. There is not, we have not made the final decision on that, and we have multiple curriculums kind of at our fingertips right now. But what is really important is that our teachers will model these concepts with lots of different learning ways. It's oral, it's written, it's music, it's song, it's all the ways of modeling with manipulatives that teaches this math at the younger ages. We want them to be fluent in their math skills, and we want them to really be memorizing those facts when their brains are really open to that and sponges. Quick story, I was a middle school math teacher, and I had this 7th grade girl, I'll call her Sarah, sweetest thing in the world, that she struggled. She so struggled, and she sat around in the class with all of her peers around her doing linear algebra and doing it pretty fast without their calculators. And she was with her calculator because she needed to do 56 divided by 8 because she didn't know that, or she didn't know that 12 minus 7 was 5, and she couldn't do those in her head, so she would take copious amounts of time to do her assignments. And it was so frustrating. And she would come to me, and she came to me one day, she was teary-eyed, and I just remember it like it was yesterday. Mrs. Croft, if I had known how important it was going to be to know my math facts in 7th grade, I would have absolutely worked harder. And I thought, oh, sweetie, first of all, it's not too late. But second of all, it's not all your fault because we got away from that emphasis on our math facts when they were younger. It doesn't mean that we don't want to teach higher level problem solving when they're young. We just want to do it when it's developmentally appropriate. And we want them to be successful later, so we want to build that foundation.
Your slide.
I was not on math.
Okay.
There it is.
So in a liberal arts school, you are going to see all the same subjects that you would see in almost any school, right? But still in America, all of our subject matter is based on that classical and liberal arts foundation. But why and how we do it is really different. And so I wanted to talk a minute about history. I often ask my middle school kids, what 2 words do you hear in the word history? His story. All history, secular and sacred, belong to God. It is in history that we see God's plan unfold, but we also see man's response. God's plan is always good. Man's not always good. So in viewing history to evaluate what have we done as individual people or as cultures, what ideas, what inventions, what movements are in line with the plan of God and which ones are not, we learn to begin to evaluate our own part in the history. Why do we study literature? To be part of a beautiful conversation about what it means to be human. Great literature always teaches us something about who we are. And in literature, we can have a conversation with people who lived long before us. And as writers of literature, we can speak to people of our own time, and maybe even to people who come long after us.
The natural sciences, I love this picture because we have a child doing exactly what we should be doing in science, which is observing. That's really what science is just observing the natural world. Now, certainly, all you really need is nature. You need a journal, and you need some inquiring minds and some basic equipment to study it, which we have also already acquired. In the natural sciences, in this approach, we want children to observe their world so that they can learn deeply about it and become masters of it. So if they're drawing a beautiful flower, then eventually that flower, they're going to notice the stamen and the pistil, and they're going to notice the parts of it, and we're going to talk about the science behind what is in that flower. You can sure learn a lot about plants and life cycles and insects and minerals through gardening. You know, we can teach all of that through an integrated approach to the natural sciences. We will have textbooks. We have some textbooks already, but they should never, in a science curriculum, I don't think textbooks should ever be your primary source of engaging the child. So that's the natural sciences.
Okay, so why do we study Latin? From a practical perspective, 2/3 of the English language is rooted in Latin. The study of Latin develops incredible mental discipline, and learning a foreign language at the elementary level, I think, is part of any well-rounded education. But with Latin, we have a choice that actually will help us to improve our own language, our own vocabulary, but also allows the child to have a foundation so that when they move on to high school, they have a wide variety of Romance languages that they can choose for themselves. The arts. We have included 2 kinds of arts. The fine arts are those things that are created by man for their own sake, for their own beauty. And our fine arts will be music and art. Our music will focus primarily on the primary instrument, the human voice. Our children will learn to train their voice, to train their ear, and to read the language of music. Art will be a combination of art history, where we see the masters and recognize and appreciate them, but also where we learn the tools and techniques of the artist so that we can create our own. We will have PE. PE is primarily aimed at body control, but interestingly, body control is foundational for moral formation, because at the end of the day, it's not just enough to know what's right and to choose what's right. We actually have to make our body do or not do what is required. And I want to talk a minute here about recess, because even recess will be different. For us, recess is not a break from learning. It's simply a different environment. Our outdoor spaces are designed to ignite the imagination of the child. They will have the freedom to choose how to use their leisure time well. They will be encouraged to organize their own games and create. I had a little boy last year, and I asked him, "Do you like kickball?" And he said, "Yes, very much so." But it's been banned at recess because we were fighting. And it made me think about an error in pedagogy that I have seen in my own children's education all the way down the line. It is never okay to point out what is wrong on the math test, on the paper, in their behavior, and call that teaching. Consequence is a part of the learning process, but teaching is guiding the child in how to do it right until they can do it on their own.
Did you want to talk about the practical arts?
Oh, I forgot the practical arts.
I'm going back.
Sorry. Yes, so there are the fine arts and then there are the practical arts. And the practical arts are those things we do for a purpose that we use in our daily lives. These can be things like how to properly mop a floor, how to beautifully set a table, how to look someone in the eye when you talk to them, but also what we're calling our prairie arts. And this is to connect our kids to their own place in history. And the word Olathe actually means beautiful. And we have in our parish an abundance of people that still practice these arts today: quilting and needlepoint, woodworking, cake decorating, baking. And so it is our hope that through these prairie arts, we will allow those masters to pass on those practical arts to the next generation of Kansans.
Hold on just a second. I want to close with a few final thoughts. Sometimes in our approach, less will be more. And it's not less education. We are going to have plenty of that and the best education. But less extraneous fluff that sometimes doesn't matter, that doesn't necessarily matter, and honestly sometimes does harm, which we definitely want to avoid. One of the complaints that I hear from teachers is that there's just never enough time. Part of that is the testing load that they're given, but it seems that just other non-educational things just get in the way. And it's our job as administrators to make sure that we free up our teachers to have this time, this place for children to go deeply into what they love and to learn deeply, and we call it incarnational teaching, which is to give the child that which they can hold on to. In other words, it just makes learning more meaningful. I know that as a teacher, and I was tied to binders and binders full of Common Core standards that we can avoid, and that we want to try to avoid all that testing that's driving instruction that we know might not serve the purpose that we have in our classrooms. Our classical philosophy is that we will focus on the essential, literacy and math, and we'll do it with precision and depth, but not the needless breadth that might be inappropriate to that age of a child. All the arts that Sheila talked about are so great because they make learning fun. And and the liberal arts are fun. All learning should be fun for children. It should not be drudgery. School should never be drudgery. We want our children to live life well. We want them to be well-rounded, and we want them to leave education, leave their 8th grade year with us being the best humans they can be.
And as a middle school teacher, I would always ask kids, what's your favorite subject? Their favorite subjects are the subjects they're good at. And their least favorite subjects are the subjects they're not good at. Our job is to make sure they are good at all the subjects so that they can actually figure out which one they really, really like, not just take the one by default that they are naturally good at.
Okay. So we've reached the end of the presentation. Thank you for hanging with us that long. I think Father has some closing remarks. I'm going to leave the survey up there, but that might be a little distracting.
What a cute cry. Precious baby. So please do fill this out. At the beginning, I think the sound was off a little bit for those who are joining us with live stream. So we're planning to open K through 2. That's based off of demographics, especially. That's what we've gotten so far in response in the surveys and such. It's a really strange phenomenon that 3rd grade, we have no 2nd graders this year at Prince of Peace, which is just shocking, which means there's going to be basically no 3rd graders when we open up next year. So it doesn't make financial sense for us to explore that. One of the things, again, just to restate this, that came up at the presentation last week was about preschool. So we were evaluating how that fit in, and we had a lot of feedback where we really wanted to fit in, is what we heard. And so we are listening to that, and we'll take that into account, and if we can, implement that. So the survey is very important. Please use it and pass it on to any of those that you think could find what we're doing valuable. Then I'll just close with this and then open it up to question and answers. So a music director that I had years ago said, you know, I can try to explain what the church has in mind for music, but that doesn't work at all. What works is for them to come and experience it. That's what's convincing. Now, they did a great job. They're a marvelous team. I have a lot of confidence and trust in them. As good as the presentation is, it's hard to capture the experience. And so here's the second anecdote that I'll use, and that's from my visitation of one of the, we'll say, top tier liberal arts schools, elementary schools in the country. They are kind of the benchmark for many others as they turned from a traditional parochial approach to a classical liberal arts, and it went from a school that was dying to one that has huge waiting lists, right? So it's an extraordinary case study for this. So I went there and toured the school and then went into one of the classrooms. It might have been 6th grade or something like that. And to see this at work was the first time that I'd ever experienced it. They were studying history, I'll put quote unquote studying history, so it was medieval history. And so they were looking at some of the agricultural techniques at the time, some of the larger happenings in the area, but then they began to study the construction of one of the cathedrals, one of the beautiful churches. So then they began to look at it's a little bit of math as you're doing that. And then as they saw the church progress, then they're seeing the stained glass windows with these figures in there. And now they're having their geometry in the midst of this exploration of history, and then it opens up the possibility for them to discuss what was the music like then. So then they begin to explore the music that was offered then, and then what's the liturgy like? And it was this fascinating approach where all these different connections were being made in the minds of the kids, so that was their studying is solidified in a way that just is rather difficult to accomplish if it's topic or subject by subject by subject disconnected. And part of the beauty of what this will do is integrate all of that so that the kids are given this great vision of how things all fit together. So I'm very grateful for their presentation. I will say, when you see it in action, that's where you really see the beauty of it. Now, Q&A. What I'm going to run out to you if you have a question so that those online can hear what the questions are. Yeah, Susie.
What about children who have been identified with like a learning disability, and what kind of accommodations do you guys provide for something like that?
Yeah. So questions about disabilities. We have so it depends on what it is. We are in the Spring Hill School District, actually. So I have made contact with the Spring Hill School District to start the process of forming a partnership with them, so that the question last week came, I have a child that receives speech services, and they actually receive it from the Spring Hill School District, which we would be able to partner with Spring Hill to offer those services. So if we have some sort of need for a special need that is requiring an IEP or something like that, then we work with Spring Hill School District, bring them in for evaluations, and work in partnership with the public school to help provide for the needs of every child. And all children, because of a federal law, actually have access to those services. And so we find that partnership works really well. In a small school, if we can't have full-time speech on our staff, then we can partner with the public schools to provide that.
Yeah, I was just wondering about like safety and security around because it's a busy kind of street.
Oh, yes, yeah. So just the street, that's what you're concerned about? Just in general? Right. So in terms of traffic flow, the standards that the county and the city expect of all schools, we will have to abide by in order to open up. So the same sort of things that you would see at any other schools can be true here as well. So we're on the hook for creating enough slots on our property for pickup and drop off, which includes turning lanes will have to be added and such for that. In terms of the security of the school itself, we are just met with the architects and contractor yesterday discussing part of that. Security cameras, key card, doors, and then we're adding like a second tier security system where the person will ring the bell at the main entrance with the camera in front of them. They'll be buzzed into the second tier where the front door will close, but they still don't have access yet to the school itself. We're building a wall to create basically a vestibule, secured vestibule, in which then we can conduct further investigation before we open the door to them. Yeah, sure.
How will those cameras be monitored?
Well, we will have a dedicated administrative assistant who will be the one who's buzzing people in, right?
What about like all the other exterior doors?
Yes, so the exterior doors aren't used, right? The only access point is the main door, but all the other doors would have cameras that would track any traffic around them, but they're not going to be opened, right? Unlocked, accessible.
What doors will they use to go outside for recess or PE? How are those doors? So is that different than the front door? Is that a different door that they would use to access?
Probably not. I'll say we haven't gotten that far in the discussion which door we would use for PE.
But those
Yeah.
are the ones that would have the key cards, so only the teachers would have key cards. No outside people would come in and out of those doors. So that would be, the teachers would have inside and outside access.
And the doors are all new at the school, so they're high-quality security doors with that card access.
Father, we'll probably find out more through the surveys. What about transportation distance? It's all going to be by the parents?
Yeah, just like really any other parochial school, there's no bus system. Now, I vaguely recall from my former assignment that there was the possibility of coordinating with the public school system, but it wouldn't necessarily be an exact drop-off. That's another place, but there's no plan for us to provide busing.
I was curious what the renovation schedule is for the school and just what contingency plans might be in place for final inspections and start of the school year. And also, if I may, you know, assuming everything is fully funded to complete and you know, how does the future expansion of the school look like if we start, you know, with the child in second grade, for example? Is the Archdiocese committed to actually extending that out through 8th grade fully?
Don't assume that. No. The only way that a parochial school works is through the tuition typically and through contributions from parishioners, right? So it's heavily subsidized. So the Archdiocese, by giving us the green light to go ahead with opening our academy, anticipates it, it's going to go through 8th grade, right? And the plan will be to open a grade each year until we max out at 8th grade. In terms of construction timeline, we're moving along just fine with that, really. We have basically all the construction documents done. The only items that were somewhat concerning were the mechanical, so basically the HVAC system, since they have a longer lead time. But we're still tracking right now so that it should be completed in May, which gives us several months before we need to move in. So we do have some wiggle room in there right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a question to piggyback on that. As far as tuition, how is that being determined based on like parish or, you know, out of quarters, around the area?
Right, right. So,
Can you repeat the question, Bob?
oh, thanks. Yes, the question was about basically the funding model. What's that going to look like? We have discussed the two basic approaches for a parochial school, and that would be tuition and subsidy, a subsidy being paid by the parish. Now, there's some fundraising involved in that typically, but it's a smaller portion of the overall amount, maybe 5% or something like that. The other model, which is less familiar in this archdiocese, would be a tithing model, where the expectation would be that the family would tithe, biblical tithe being 10% to the parish, and then the tuition would not be imposed. Fees, yes, but the idea is that if you're here invested in the parish, then the fruit of the parish is yours. So we explored that. That's been brought up a couple times. And there are a few factors that have kind of informed our view on this. Let's see, one is that according to the school office, we're one signature away from having school savings accounts in the state of Kansas, meaning if we would have a different governor, that legislation was already passed by Congress and just was not signed by the governor. What that would do, I think they were looking at like a $5,000 savings account for each child that would allow the family to direct those funds to wherever they wanted their child to go. That seems like a real possibility. It's what it sounds like to me, a different governor. That could be a possibility, but that only works if, to our benefit, if we have a tuition-based model. So that informs us as we evaluate this. But also we did a brief analysis of the families that had indicated interest when we conducted a couple of these sessions last year, and just looked at, well, what does the culture of tithing look like in those families that had responded? And I don't know if there was 50 families or so, something like that. And it was pretty clear that the real culture of tithing wasn't deeply ingrained. So there's real concern that if we opened up the school with that model, we could close the school at the end of the year, right? So that it's a beautiful approach, but it would take a lot of work to develop in that way. So we were anticipating doing a tuition subsidy approach, opening up this possibility to those outside the parish boundaries, if there are seats available, and that rate of tuition would be different based on in parish or out of parish, which is a standard approach for parochial schools, because the idea is you're invested in the parish, you're contributing to the parish, and so the parish is partnering with you. If you live elsewhere, you're not here, you know, singing in the choir and putting something in the basket, then the partnership is different in that way. Yeah, so that's I think the state of things right now is what we're anticipating. Exactly how we present that, I think, is still up for discussion, meaning there are organizations that have been very helpful with private schools, suggesting that what needs to be communicated is what it actually costs to educate the child, because tuition is not what it costs to educate a child. It's maybe 2/3 or somewhere around there. And the thought is, and they've been very successful with this, is if you present or if you charge only the tuition, then there are many families who can afford to pay the entire cost to educate their child. And you're giving a discount to those who don't need a discount and making it harder for the school to operate. So there is some consideration of that, and then financial aid being available, to subsidize those who would desire that. So I think that's an open question at this point, but likely tuition would be in the realm of what we see at other parochial schools, which ranges from like $4,800 to $5,500, something like that. Okay, so that.
My other question that kind of goes with that, when do you anticipate application opening up, like in January or?
Enrollment.
Yeah. Enrollment, we're working on that right now. I mean, we would hope to have an enrollment process ready to go before the end of December. So we can start enrolling families as soon as we have our school information system online and have that enrollment. So we're making those decisions now. So we hope once we are ready to go, we can open enrollment at that time with that system. We don't have to wait till January, so we can enroll sooner if we need to. Yeah.
And then along with that, with some of the details you were mentioning about the homeschooling with the older kids. So we have a younger who's kindergarten right now, and then we have 5th grade, who would be 6th grade next year. Are you kind of waiting to see what the applications and enrollment looks like before knowing if you're going to open up those hybrid older? Because I did fill out the Google form yesterday, so I saw the options on there.
Yeah. So for those of you that haven't seen the survey, the options that we put on there were like maybe 1 or 2 days, and what would be beneficial for your child. Would it be theology? Is it literature? Is it the arts? What is it? So we give some choices on there. So yes, I don't have any good answers for that until we get those surveys back and see what the interest is in the parish. Yeah.
What will the hours of their day be? School start and stop time?
Good question. We haven't decided that yet, but it will be if we had parents who had a child at another school, because we're not offering, we want to make sure that drop-off and pickup times work with neighboring schools. Like Prince of Peace, we would want to make sure that a parent who had a child at Prince of Peace could also drop off at our school. So it'd be a consideration. It would be definitely not outside my guess is that we would go later, so we would start a little bit later, more like 8:15. I actually don't know the exact number for that, but somewhere in there, and go till more 3:15, 3:30. That's my gut on that.
A lot of that is on the surveys.
Yes.
But then also at some point we're going to reach out. Soon we'll reach out to all the families who we have here who are John Paul II parishioners, but send their kids to Prince of Peace to explain some of what we've explained tonight and the funding and how we have been glad to subsidize their partner with them during this time. But as we open up grades, then we will only be able to subsidize kids within the grades that we offer, right? If that makes sense. So I think until we would actually be able to see how many families fit that example, like you've got a 6th grader at Prince of Peace and a 1st grader here, we won't know for sure how valuable it will be to create a schedule that matches that closely. If we have 1, okay, that's an indicator. If we have 10 families, that's another indicator. Okay. And maybe I should restate this just to make it clear. So the diocese says that parishes are responsible, because Catholic education is a good, parishes are responsible to subsidize the children whose parents desire that they be in a Catholic school, but your parish cannot accommodate them. Meaning you don't have a school, or you have so many kids that you can't pack any more into a classroom. So we will continue to subsidize Prince B's families who have children in grades that we don't, but not in grades that we do. Otherwise, then we end up just multiplying the number of teachers that we're paying. That makes sense? Is that clear? Okay.
Do you know when you would know if you're gonna have before and after school care, and when you might with Spring Hill decide, like, or you'll know if they'll be coming in for like speech services or something like that?
I think we will definitely work out the services. Our meeting with the superintendent's office in Spring Hill, we set it for March. But I think that is, so maybe there is some question as to how that will actually look. But so we would know more in the spring exactly what that looks like.
But there's a legal responsibility
there is,
on the part of the school district. They're funded through your contributions, right?
Yeah. We will have a partnership, and they will have some responsibility for that. And they can provide busing. There's all kinds of those details to work out through that legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just hoping that they'd have somebody come in so we wouldn't have to miss a whole half of the day.
I understand, yeah. I know.
Yeah, so I think until she has those meetings, I think we're the first private school that Spring Hill has worked with, so it's kind of new for them.
I think at last week's meeting, you guys had talked about potential class size of maybe, I think the number was maybe 18 to 24, if I remember right. I just wanted to clarify, is that what you guys have expected based on the surveys and enrollment, or is that just an estimate? I didn't know what facts were of how many families you have had in the surveys that say, yeah, we really think we're gonna, send kids to JP2.
Yeah. I mean, Father has some data from a year ago, so it's pretty old data. And so we set that number thinking that seems like a reasonable estimate that we could have 18 to 24. Now we do not have enough survey data currently to give you a well-informed answer. I'll be honest, I just don't yet. That's why we really are making phone calls, talking, trying to get some really good data and understand what our class sizes would look like.
Is that mostly coming out of Prince of Peace coming over, or do you see families from the public schools coming over to JP2? I mean, I know with kindergarten it'll be, new families, but I didn't know for first and second grade what you expect.
And both, yes, both, and out of parish. Because we're a classical liberal arts school, there's some attraction for those who might even make a drive. So it's all three of those.
And we would say probably also the homeschooling community may be another source, right? But certainly those.
Just to follow on that, are you going to be limited with the number of classes for each grade? Yeah, I think you mentioned if there's a seat available, or is there a chance you might actually have a second class?
No, we don't anticipate being able to offer a second section in the grade. At this point, we don't see numbers that would indicate that we'll need to. Now, the younger the grades, the more children we have, which, if you go to the 9 o'clock mass, it's the way it is. So those are heavier for sure. It's true. It's true.
And the reason is we would not be able to offer we would run out of space at the current speed.
At the beginning of your presentation, you used the words joy and joyful, intentional. Jesus is central. So I would like to know a little bit more about how our students would celebrate the liturgical calendar versus a secular calendar in our Catholic liberal arts school.
Yeah, and I touched on that just a tiny bit. You know, I think there's a good example coming up that we have a beautiful Saints feast day coming up. It's All Saints Day, right? So we really want to lift up All Saints Day and All Souls Day the next day and make sure that that would be that, you know, our children, if they're come to school in a costume, let's come to school in a Saints costume and really celebrate that as and lift that up. That our Advent programs would be appropriate to the Advent season, but we want to celebrate Christmas, and so maybe the Christmas celebration happens during the Christmas season, which actually I know, this is countercultural, is actually in January. Our children who are in catechesis know this well because they grow with the liturgical calendar so well. They know that, you know, purple is a time of preparation. We know that white is for celebration. And so we know that we're preparing during Advent. And so because that's so central to our mission, this celebrating liturgical time, I can give you another example. I hear of Valentine's parties, but I never hear Easter parties. You know, Easter is the greatest feast of the church year. We should celebrate Easter. And we should do it during that 6 weeks after Easter, certainly not during Lent, right? So living that time. I really want a First Friday. I want an 8th grader that leaves our school to know that a First Friday is particularly devoted to the Sacred Heart. I would want a child who experienced Holy Week to know that the Divine Mercy Chaplet is an important part of a prayer, and that we would teach them about Divine Mercy Sunday and what that looks like. So celebrating liturgical time means that if it's St. Maximilian Kolbe's feast day that day, that on the announcements we're going to make sure, oh, happy feast day, St. Maximilian. We're so glad to pray to you today, pray through you today.
And also, too, it's the child is a celebratory soul. And so it's also just moving away from the secular, that we celebrate nature, that we celebrate butterflies, that we celebrate a beautiful day, that we celebrate the leaves falling from the trees, right? That again, that is also, in a sense, liturgical, right? The leaves change colors and die or appear to be dead. That is very liturgical. And they begin to make those connections when you celebrate those things, as opposed to celebrating a secular holiday. So.
Although I don't have any kids or grandkids that'll be going here, I was kind of interested. Are you going to have Mass over there?
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe we skipped over that. So we're planning Monday and Friday to have Mass until we get an associate. So right now that's what we're planning, Monday and Friday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're still working out those details. We have some deacons. We might do exposition, some adoration. Rosary is certainly a possibility, but we'll have kind of a staple every day of that. Thank you for asking that.
So for a non-parishioner that wanted to enroll, what do you foresee as the earliest opportunity to move forward with it and to enroll?
Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that once we open enrollment up, it's going to be open up for everyone. Isn't that correct? Now, if by chance we had 24 second graders from the parish enroll, then we have to give priority to the parish families, but we're not anticipating that. We don't see it in our database that we're going to have that many, so there should be openings in all the grades.
Like roughly when you're thinking of officially accepting enrollments?
So when we open enrollment, which would be, we're hoping to open enrollment in December, would be our hope to open enrollment. And it is true that parishioners would have priority, but we would want everyone to enroll that was interested in enrolling. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I don't know if we have a cutoff date, right, or decision date, we haven't gotten that far yet. Enrollment. No.
Yeah.
We don't have that yet. Yes.
So if you have a classroom over 15 students If you provide CGS, will you split the students into 2 atriums so they can get the true CGS experience?
I'll let Sheila speak to that. Sheila will be mostly our catechist.
Yes, absolutely. Also, too, we will do a full hour and a half of catechesis a week. And whenever I bring catechesis to a preschool, even an hour and a half isn't enough. I mean, they would stay there all day if we would let them. But yeah, and I've done a variety of different ways that you can split kids. During the pandemic, I had to split them into 3s to have smaller groups in my space. And actually, teachers really, really like that because it gives them a smaller group for an hour and a half a week as well for some of that more individualized learning. So yeah, absolutely. You can be assured they will have a beautiful atrium experience. We'll make sure of that. For sure.
And that's really where the largest renovation work is going to take place. New renovations, so, you know, roof, ceiling, mechanical, flooring, painting, glass, doors, you know, all of that. But on the interior, that's going to be the area in which we do the most work to create 2 nice atriums. Yeah, so they're going to be good sized. Yeah.
Along those lines with catechesis, will there be a teacher dedicated to catechesis, and especially with all the other specials you talked about, art and music and PE? How is that going to be? With just 3 grades, I didn't know, are you going to have individual teachers, or how will that all be handled?
That's me.
Yes, she's doing all the.
Yes, that in the beginning, that will be me. One of the things we hope to do is form all of our teachers in catechesis. Whether or not they go into the atrium depends, but catechesis is so central to our vision for education, for the development of the child. So eventually, the teachers themselves would be able to be catechists, but for the time being, for the rest of my life, it will be me if I'm here. So. It's kind of, it'll be a combination. It'll depend on what we have and what we can afford and all of that. Classical teachers are going to want to do a lot of that because they integrate it through everything. So they teach them a particular means of art, but then the children have access to that art in their history or in their science. They're singing all the time. But we also do want to have dedicated art and music where we're really working more on those fundamentals. So again, it'll just depend on who the Holy Spirit brings us and what we work out.
Yeah, so we're anticipating music.
PE, anticipating music and PE and art.
And art, yes, yeah, as having individuals to do that.
Would be at least some time in with a dedicated teacher.
The question is, are we reaching out to Benedictine? Yes, I actually just, I shadowed in a class just last week and have met some of their students who could possibly become fellows. So that's a partnership we're already forming. And we also have a partnership with ISIL, the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education. They have a formation program that would be really beneficial for us as well. So those are 2 good areas to pull a liberally trained educator from. Mm-hmm.
And they're already reaching out to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
When do you guys plan on hiring teachers?
Applications are going to be opening up in mid to late December, so that interviews can happen either during Christmas, right at the end of Christmas break, to allow that young person to have that Christmas break, and then we would hire in January before contracts push out for other schools.
It's been fascinating. So in parish work, it's awfully hard to attract talent, but for this academy, we've had people already reach out to us expressing interest and desire in, do you have a kindergarten teacher yet? Do you have a first grade teacher yet? So it's really promising to already experience that. Yeah,
We have a librarian.
that's right. Yeah, already.
For the outside space, I love the garden idea and all of that. Well, within this approach, is there a playground? I mean, and then also too, just logistically wise, fencing with a busy street. I guess that was kind of a two-part question, but.
Yeah, yeah, so fencing is anticipated, and I think we haven't sketched out what would likely be the preschool area. If we go that direction, that would be on the east side of the building, so they would have easy access to that, and that would be fenced in. And then on the, what would be northwest side, that's where the playground would be in the fencing.
There's a blacktop area there, and actually Sheila and I just went last week to kind of scope out what that could look like. What does the kickball area look like? What does the blacktop area look like, with possibly some basketball goals and swings, climbing equipment? Would we have the really large playground equipment from the start? Our vision is probably not, but to have an area, there's already kind of an area that would be designated as a mulch area for those playground type equipments, whether it's swings, whether it's some sort of climbing apparatus. Yeah.
I just want to tell a story. I had my Sodality girls, who are my 4th through 8th grade girls, and we got done early, and we went out, and I brought a pink pool noodle. And they came up with, in 25 minutes, 5 different games to play with the pink pool noodle. So it's those kinds of things that we really want to see. Is we don't want to make it too easy for them to choose. Obviously, you got to have swings. Everybody loves swings, right? But we really want to encourage them to make it up, and use their imaginations.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's not just free time or break time, but it's a way to engage them at another level.
And they love making up their own games. They're their favorite games, is the ones they make up themselves. And kickball.
And kickball. Any other?
So if we pursue the pre-K in fall 2025, will they have to be 3 in September? Or, like, for example, my daughter's birthday is January, so she'd be real close. And just that age, they change so quickly. What are you considering?
So your daughter turns 3 in this coming January. She turns 3, next January she turns 3. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We need to collect more information on what our ages are. We have the idea that we would have for pre-K would be, but for a 3-year-old preschool, we're not sure. So I wish I had better answers for you.
But atrium,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Atrium, yes, for sure.
Is there a cafeteria or the kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is kind of a hot topic, and I actually found when I called people, it's a concern. We have a warming kitchen, and so the initial plan is to be sack lunches, and we have a warming kitchen. There are partnerships with public schools to bring in lunches, and that some of our parochial schools do that. They bring in lunches, and there's also fun like monthly. You can bring in food from outside and purchase that, and we can provide that as a school, like Spirit Day. You can bring in pizza and provide that. But we really, we will be a sack lunch school, but looking into the possibility, probably in the future, of partnering with one of the local school districts that can provide outside hot lunches. Mm-hmm.
How does this classical liberal arts, what is the results with the standardized testing? Just, we know that the kids have to do that in the fall and the spring. What are the results from that for kids who are in this type of curriculum, either at this age or when they go on to take the SAT, ACT?
High, actually, high. And the graphs are, they're actually, I wish, I should have included some of that data in here, but it's really exceptional, to tell you the truth. Our standardized testing approach would be once a year in the spring, not twice a year. It would be once a year in the spring as a benchmark data, and I think that standardized testing is an important tool for teachers, and it can guide instruction, and it can keep your teachers honest Is this child really performing at the level that we think that they are? And so standardized testing definitely has a role. There's not a ton of data at the younger ages for how that looks in terms of standardized testing data at this K through 2 data. There's a lot more at the high school level for classical and how that looks, and it's exceptional. Yeah, it's really exceptional. Something I should definitely pull up and have at my fingertips. One more. There you go.
I have more, and I can
That's
talk to
okay.
you
Yeah,
afterwards
yeah.
too. What are your guys' thoughts about uniforms?
Yeah, good question. We talk a lot about uniforms, actually. Sheila wanted to answer this question, so I'm going to hand it over.
Not about what they will look like, but about why we wear uniforms. I personally love uniforms. Nobody liked them when they were wearing them, but you love them when you don't have them anymore. But when we think about that word uniform, we hear in it unity. And one of the complaints about uniforms is that it stifles our individuality. And I completely disagree with this, because uniforms are a visible sign that we belong to something bigger than ourselves. And I also think from that uniformity, we teach children to really look for in themselves and in others things that really are unique and beautiful about them. Their intelligence, their creativity, their humor, right? And in so doing, we teach this invisible lesson that our individuality and unity are not at odds. Our individuality is essential to and in service of being a part of a bigger something. So that's why. Now, when we go to pick them out, that will be fun. We'll get feedback on that.
Yeah, how long do we anticipate being at Hilltop before starting the new building project?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, really, it's going to depend on a few factors. How the parish grows, really. I mean, you can see all of the development in the area, so that this area is going to grow is not in question. How many of those people are Catholic? That's a question. And how many of that set send their kids to us? That's another question. I think my challenge to Ginny has been, well, demonstrate to us that we need the school. And then I think you'll have the parish get behind and build what we need. But I think the need has to be demonstrated. So that's what I would see. Yeah, if the school fills up and we need more space, well, there's indication it's good. That's how I would see it. I mean, we've tossed around 5 to 10 years, but it really just depends on the population.
In the meantime, the school will be it'll be a really lovely place to have a school. It really
It's a
will.
fantastic piece of property. I mean, it's a good investment for us long term. Whether or not we keep it, which we might, and use it in different ways, or sell it. 175th and Merlin is going to be a very desirable location. Okay, last one.
So, Father, you gave an example of like a junior high day in the life of walking through the examples. Do you have something of an example for kindergarten or first grade or second grade? Like, especially when they're learning to read and there's a lot of memorization of the math, the facts, and the phonics. How does that relate to the more interactive side of it?
I think one of the biggest differences you would see if you are, like my child has a minute-by-minute schedule in their day. It looks a little bit different. We have blocks of time for reading. So there will be a block of time, and in that reading time, it gives the teacher some flexibility, and obviously that reading block time would be every single day, right? And then most likely there would be a block of time for math. And for that kindergartner, we tend to put those, the arts and the prairie arts and all that, we tend to put that in the afternoon. So we'd focus in the morning. So your child's day, and it may look different on Monday than it looks on Tuesday, so that it's not so regimented. I think that's one of the key features, that it gives our teachers a little bit of flexibility. We're seeing that we need to slow down right here, and we need to spend a little bit more time with this skill. So we're going to do that because I have some flexibility to do that. I don't have to move to social studies at 10:05 because I can take some extra time and do that because I'm going to integrate history and all of that into this reading. And so it looks a little bit more integrated. You want to add to that a little bit?
Well, I would just say I think one of the biggest mistakes in modern education was the idea that memorizing for the young child is boring. It is not. Now, we can make it awful, but they love to memorize. They love to sing songs. They love to know things. And so it's a matter of really tapping into that we don't have to just memorize in one particular way, that we don't just have to do it in one particular setting. When I was homeschooling, we used to do our math facts on the trampoline, right? There's all sorts of different ways to make that memory fun, because again, when things become boring and drudgery to kids is usually when they are not good at them. And so making them, knowing that they have individual goals, not every child is going to learn at exactly the same rate. Not every child is going to accomplish things at exactly the same pace, and we really want the kids to understand that. You're not competing with somebody else, right? You're competing with the 2s or the 3s, right? And so it really is, they do love it. They love it.
And teachers must love it too. You know, so over the past couple of years, I've gone to conferences to learn more about this, and those especially at the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education, that organization has just taken off. It's a huge movement across the U.S., but they will say none of us grew up with this. None of us who are in charge, who are leading this, none of us did. We discovered it at some point and said, that's what we want. We didn't have that. We want that for our kids, or to be able to develop that in the school. I thought that was one of the most compelling arguments that I saw for it. Okay, we're going to let you go home. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to visit with him now. Good night.